Okay, this is slide 11, our last slide in our Imperialism unit, and we're talking about Teddy Roosevelt's influence in foreign affairs here. We'll start with something called the Roosevelt Corollary. Now, a corollary is simply an addition to something that already exists, a change in it because you've added to it, right? The thing we're adding to is the Monroe Doctrine. Go back to President James Monroe, way back. And basically Monroe said that the United States would be the policeman of the Western Hemisphere. We will take care of this half of the world. Europe doesn't need to worry about it. Right? Well, Roosevelt is going to very much agree with that theory and add to it. Roosevelt says that any Latin American countries, meaning the Caribbean, Central America, South America, everything but the United States, basically, any Latin American countries that have debts to European nations, the United States will pay your debt off. So if Venezuela, we'll pick, owes Germany, we'll pick, money, the United States will pay Germany whatever Venezuela owns. Now, why would we do that? Why would we pay off all these debts? Because there's lots of them. It's going to be very expensive. Because we would much rather have these Latin American countries owe us money instead of owing European powers money. If a Latin American country owes money to Europe, Europe has a right to come over here and get it. The last thing we want is Europe coming over to this half of the world. Our half, we call it. Right? So the Roosevelt Corollary says, we will pay your debts to any European country. Because we'd rather you owe us than you owe them. Right? Now, this gives Roosevelt the excuse to get involved in Latin American affairs, so much so that the Caribbean Sea gets nicknamed the Yankee Lake. Okay? Here you see the political cartoon. There's Roosevelt marching around the Caribbean Sea, all these Caribbean islands here, pulling his navy behind him on a string. There he goes, marching around, pulling his navy behind him. Okay? Now, this is a good time to talk about Roosevelt's foreign policy. Okay? There is an African proverb. Roosevelt was a big hunter, went on safari to Africa. We talked about all that, right? There was an African proverb that said, "Speak softly, but carry a big stick, and you will go far." Speak softly, but carry a big stick, and you will go far. Okay? Now, Roosevelt will sort of drop the "and you will go far" part, and it comes to simply be known as, Roosevelt's foreign policy comes to be known as speak softly, but carry a big stick. Meaning, speak softly, use diplomacy, use negotiation if you can, but carry a big stick. Don't be afraid to use the military if you have to. And for Roosevelt, the big stick was the U.S. Navy. Notice the political cartoon here. There he is carrying the big stick over his shoulder, but pulling his navy behind him. For Roosevelt, the big stick, the threat of force, was the U.S. Navy, his modern steel navy. Okay? So we stick our nose into quite a few countries' business in Latin America, okay? And many of them resent us for it. We'll get some payback later on for that. Okay? Roosevelt's influence will also carry outside of just the United States the Russo-Japanese War. It's a war between Russia and Japan. Okay? Now, Roosevelt was asked to help negotiate an end to that war. Okay? Here you see the political cartoon up here at the top, the Russian bear and the Japanese dragon ready to fight it out. Roosevelt will negotiate an end to that war. For his efforts, he will be given the Nobel Peace Prize making him the first American to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Okay? Roosevelt has lots of famous firsts. First president to fly in an airplane, first president to go in a submarine, first president to leave the country while in office, first president to get a Nobel Peace Prize. There's lots of famous firsts for Roosevelt here. But the negotiation that Roosevelt leads here, the agreement that they arrive at, ends up pleasing neither Russia nor Japan. Neither one are happy with it, but especially Japan. Japan feels like Russia got a lot more out of this war than they did. So this agreement, while it wins Roosevelt the Peace Prize, will leave the United States and Japan as rivals in the Pacific. And it kind of sets the stage for what's going to come later on between the U.S. and Japan. Right? Now, speaking of Japan, let's talk about immigration to the United States from Asia. A lot of Asians come to the U.S. looking for a better life. The U.S. has the highest standard of living in the world at this point. More technology, more industry. It's the dominant country in the world. So a lot of people look to come to America for a new start. And Japan will be no different. Okay? Japanese immigrants to California increased. And although they were still a small percentage, Californians worried that pretty soon Japanese were going to take over. Right? So the San Francisco School Board starts segregating Asian students from white ones. We needed room in schools for white students, so they kick Asian students out to inferior schools, and segregation is back. This time it's against Asians, not blacks. Okay? Roosevelt works out an agreement with Japan, known as the Gentlemen's Agreement. Okay? It's another deal worked out with Roosevelt here between the U.S. and Japan. The U.S. will stop segregating Asian students in school, and in exchange, Japan agrees to stop immigration to the U.S. So they're going to cut off immigration. They will not issue visas to leave Japan to go to the U.S. anymore, and we will stop segregating Asian students. Okay? So we didn't want to segregate them to begin with. It's a win-win for us. Okay. Lastly, we need to talk about the Great White Fleet. This is Roosevelt's modern steel navy. Okay? Roosevelt gets himself 16 battleships. You see the picture down at the bottom of the screen here. He builds 16 new battleships, big steel battleships, paints them bright white, and calls it the Great White Fleet. Okay? And he sends his Great White Fleet on an around-the-world tour. Okay? They go down sort of the coast of South America, around South America. They stop in Latin American ports along the way. They make their way across the Pacific. They stop in Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia, and eventually will make their way to Japan. Okay? And these 16 battleships pull into Tokyo Harbor, drop anchor, spin their big guns around, and aim them right at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. And say to the Japanese, "Hi, remember us? We are the preeminent power in the Pacific. Don't get any ideas." Because thanks to the Russo-Japanese War and Asian immigration and all that, Japan doesn't like us very much. And Japan is modernizing. They're building their own fleet. We take this opportunity to remind them, we are the preeminent power in the Pacific, not you. Don't screw with us. Right? And with battleship guns pointed at them, the United States and Japan work out a treaty called the Takahiro Agreement. Okay? The Takahiro Agreement. And in this, both sides agreed to respect each other's territory in the Pacific and uphold the open door policy in China. So we agree, we won't screw with you, you don't screw with us, we'll play nice in China, and let's just get along. And there would be momentary peace between the U.S. and Japan. But the stage is already set for some tensions coming in the future. All right? So there you go. There's Teddy's influence in foreign powers. He's very much a sort of act first and deal with the consequences later kind of guy. When he takes Panama from the Colombians, he says, he didn't even tell Congress he was doing it. He took it, said, I took the land, Congress can debate it if they want to. But Teddy is very much a U.S. imperialist. The U.S. is clearly the best nation in the world, and it is our duty to spread U.S. values and morals to the rest of the world. Now, you can agree with it, you can disagree with it. I'm just telling you his stance on it. And if it came down to, yes, I will negotiate if I can, but I'm really not opposed to a war if I have to. So that's Teddy Roosevelt, and sadly, this is our last discussion of Teddy, my favorite president, my hero there, Teddy. We are done talking about him, but now this sets the stage for our next topic on World War I. So I bid you farewell for now, and good luck on this test.